we could in some way look at increasing the run costs and also the fixed costs. You know, that may be a start. We need to start somewhere.
The run cost, I think we need to understand on some of this stuff, on the fires I've been to. And I'm not 100% sure how this works, but if you're doing mileage, I'll direct this to you. If you're doing mileage and you go from here to there is 10 miles, here to there's back is 10 miles, so you got 20 miles, and you're there 3 hours, a lot of this equipment is running the whole time it's there, so that fuel is being burned up. So that's never gonna work out on mileage unless we've taken it in consideration somewhere along the line that I don't know about. Now, I don't know whether that was taken into consideration many years ago and it was figured in that way and it was budgeted because you're sitting there running if you run one of those big diesel engines out there for 3 or 4 or 5 hours at a fire, then it's gonna burn up 3 or 4 or 5 hours worth of diesel. Somehow that's gotta be replaced. Now, I don't know, once again, I don't know if when the mileage was originally set up, if that was factored into whatever you get per mile. I know within reason it shouldn't cost you $3.40 a mile to go 1 mile. It shouldn't cost that. But that doesn't mean I'm right on it. But I do know that from being at the fires, the vehicle sit there and you're pumping and you're using the equipment for hours on end, that it has to use a lot of fuel when you're doing that. And somehow.
So what would your suggestion be if you were to increase the fuel cost as to what you think would be a fair benchmark?
Well, you know, I think that's why we're here tonight, Judge, is to find out what some of these folks think they're. I'm not forgiving anybody carte blanche. You know that. Everybody has to answer to everybody. We have to answer to the citizens of this county. Y'all have to answer to the citizens of the county. So we have to all be fair on this. I'm just trying to figure out stuff that maybe we don't see on a regular basis, just like the mileage. Maybe we don't understand that it's 10 miles over there and 10 miles back. We understand that, but the hours that you sit there and burn this fuel up, and that can get a lot more expensive. But things like that, we're going to have to factor in on this. There's going to have to be some kind of, unless that was figured in before, and you figure you can go out there for 6 hours for $68. I don't think you can do that.
I mean, $10 is what they have in the contractual agreement. Now, do you consider that as a fair and equitable amount?
$10 a mile?
$10 a mile. So, I mean, we need to start somewhere, so if we need to start with gasoline and the cost, then, and I think that's probably a fair place to start because that's where we've seen the increases in all the wages. So I would say that fuel cost would be a concern of everybody. So let's just go ahead and start then with fuel cost.
No. Let me ask you this before we start on that. I don't know what contract you've got. I don't know if the copy I've got is right. This says $12 per mile on the one I've got. I don't know. I don't even know where this.
Now, this was the one that Ms. Tier had emailed me, all of the contracts together, each one.
Mine has a $60,000 set fee, $12 per mile, and $60 an hour. Is that what we're looking at?
Well,
That's the one we're trying to work on for.
Mine
has 10.
I've got 10, that must be it.
Mine might be
There's
over.
one-
Maybe we negotiated a little
That
bit.
was one before, because this one here, pull one out.
Here, you can have this copy. This, I printed what I thought was the latest and
The
greatest.
latest one here is $10 per mile for travel for apparatus to and from a call, as well as $60 per hour for apparatus for fire protection, firefighting equipment, time expended on each call.
Now these prices, are they based on FEMA or?
No, those are not.
Those are
FEMA
just
prices.
prices that you
Yes,
all
those are not FEMA. FEMA's much higher.
Well, since $60 is gonna be something I'm sure y'all gonna debate, let's start with the fuel. That's one that's a little bit easier to discuss.
Have y'all calculated on your fuel? I mean, do you have a fuel breakdown? And I know that every department's different. I've read these numbers and read them, and I know Plannersville's done a lot. I know, they're bigger. Vida's is bigger than some of you. 2011, I think you can throw that out the window because hopefully we'll never have that again, even though it's all factored in here. And you spend a lot of money, and I realize that, but is there a figure in mind there other than this $10? Is there something there that supports the $10, or is there? I know every one of the vehicles is not pumping and not running while we're out there at the fires. I know that, I've seen that, but I know that a lot of them are. So trying to get to a starting point here with you folks.
Well, Commissioner Green, I know that Commissioner Fink and I.
Just a little bit.
We talked a little bit earlier, and I kind of tossed around something in the $6 range as a starting point. I'm just starting with a number here.
Starting with the fire department, or starting with us?
I'm talking to you right now.
I mean, is that whose starting point is that?
I'm talking to you as a commissioner and the commissioner.
I understand that. But I'm asking you, is that a starting point and we may go
Well,
up, or is that
well,
a starting point
actually-
we can go down? I mean, that's what I'm asking you. I mean, is that, were you
I
thinking
looked
that
at-
along that line?
Perhaps doubling what they were getting, which was like $6.80.
$6.80.
I was just trying to strike a happy medium between us, but I looked at about doubling their fuel cost.
I'm just gonna take, if y'all don't care, I'm just gonna take Iola, how's that? Iola's run cost, it shows here last year, 2012, was $20,313.90. Now, that's for the hourly part and the fuel, I mean, that's the mileage and the hourly. Am I correct on that?
Correct.
How do we get the fuel cost out of this? How do we get I'm trying to do the fuel cost as mileage, if you bear with me on that. How do we determine where we're at on that? I'm sure y'all have some kind of figures. But once again, it's not gonna be the same for every department, but we're gonna try and be fair to everybody.
Primarily, what everybody has done, some trucks have, like the engines, they just have the pump that runs off the fuel tank for the truck. We have other trucks, brush trucks, tankers, etc., that have the engine that drives the truck. Therefore, you got that mileage. But you also have the pump on the truck, it's gas or diesel powered, that when you're on scene is running and pumping. What we did when we were putting our numbers together, and there's a lot of us that collaborated on this, is we tried to even out what it cost to fill back up, what we would use, we're using actual mileage wise, then our on-scene cost, and then there's a lot of other costs as far as maintenance for both the pump and the engine. Prime example, the Dyer Mill 2 fires, real sandy ground, a lot of dust and stuff, a lot of ash getting kicked up. So the departments several departments had to change oil, filters, etc., because they got clogged up over that 4-day period. So those are things that we looked at when we were trying to figure out a mileage number. Whether the 10 is high, it may be for some, for others it may not be, depending on what kind of engine, what kind of fuel mileage. An older truck obviously doesn't get as good a mileage as a newer truck. So those are things we tried to shoot for an average in a number that we felt like was going to be a starting point. All of the numbers we have, we feel like are a starting point. That they're open to negotiation, and that we can find a fair and happy medium on all of them.
Yeah, on the total for, I don't know if everybody has the same stuff here, on the total for the last 5.75 years on what I've got here, the total expenditures, one of the totals I've got is $1,903,265.20. divide that by 5.75 years per fire department, that's $33,100 a year per fire department. Times 8 is $264,000 a year is what I came up with on this. Now, whether my figures are right or not, and whether you follow me or not, I don't know. But we've,
Strictly for
with
fuel
y'all's
mileage.
figures on just the $60,000 flat fee, we're up to $480,000, and you were averaging $265,000 a year per fire department. Now, we've already gone up $136,000, $135,000 without any run cost or anything, I think is the way I figured it. So, and you see where we're at on that. I mean, we're gonna be 3 times higher than where we're at. I don't think that the county is prepared to, I don't see how we can do that. So bear with us as we work through this, and we'll try and get you what we can, but those are staggering figures when you look at them. I mean, there's, warranted, I have no, y'all obviously think they are. Feasible? Maybe not.
Well, they are higher than the figures that were given, much higher. So I think that's where, if you want to go and just put in a random figure like Commissioner Walker said on the 680, I mean, that's something that's just, I mean, just think of it, we're not putting it anywhere. But keep that in mind, so maybe we have one area to solve. So then, you alluded to the hourly rate of $60 per vehicle per hour. Now, that's, as we all know, that's triple. So maybe we need to start on that one and then decide exactly how inflated you think that is.
Well, I'll just go back to what I was saying a minute ago. When you're out there at these fires and you guys are pouring gas into your pumps and stuff that are on your grass trucks, I guess it is, and you're taking 5-gallon cans and pouring up on your motors on that, and you're burning that out. That's figured in this 680, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
The hourly's gonna be, here, and, yeah, it's, a good example, the structure fire that, we had over by High Point. Hose is expensive, it's not cheap, and we wound up getting a couple sections of hose first. Well, the hourly that we had for that whole fire for our department didn't cover even the replacement cost of the 2 sections of hose.
But we're going to get a fixed rate also, so I would think that the the equipment would come out of the increase in the fixed rate,
Well,
not in the hourly rate.
The hourly is a lot of the wear and tear on your apparatus too.
yeah, it is.
If your apparatus, if something goes wrong with running that apparatus, you can say, we've been on fires 6, 18 hours where the apparatus is constantly running. You can have something go wrong. The hourly also helps with reconditioning of the apparatus. Whatever goes wrong with the apparatus, you could have filters going out. I'm not talking about as far as gas filters or oil filters, other issues in the apparatus pump that you would have to replace. You got wear and tear on anything in that apparatus.
But get it to a real figure that they can discuss. Get it to a real figure. I know when you put in 60 and you say it's negotiable, what is a real figure? Give them something to start working with, because, I mean, like I say, if 60 is something you're shooting for, but you know you're not gonna get, give them something to go on.
Even if you took, and not trying to be wild here, even if you said $100 an hour, would you cover all of the cost? On some of these fires, you probably wouldn't.
But we always, we know that.
And that's what we're saying. We feel like at the $60 an hour level, we're being reasonable. Not saying that we're not willing to negotiate 45. We understand that the court's limited in the amount of money that's available. The court asked for what our operating expenses were, and I think that everybody did a good job of putting those numbers out there. And I think, there was some question, I got some phone calls and stuff about, well, so-and-so's got this, and so-and-so, it's real, it is, by the number of calls, the number of trucks the department has, what they're in the process of doing. You look at Whitehall, They're in the process of building a new fire station, therefore they have a large capital expenditure outlay. We don't expect the county to pay for capital expenditures.
But let me just lay this out here, because you realize that if we had to reimburse you all of your costs,
We're not
we
asking
might as
for all
well
of
be a
those.
Grimes County rural fire department.
We're not asking for all
That's
of
where,
those.
that's where the figure, where we're not reimbursing for all costs, because then that gets the commissioners into searching for a way to not have to come do this every year, and just have their own, and then they can just control how it works. But let's get to a point that we can start talking and give them something to
Well,
work for.
we've made an offer. What's the offer from the county for the hour?
I'll just, one of the things that I had thought about in the hourly rate, honest, was if we could come to just, split the difference. And I had $40 in my mind. I had, when Commissioner Walker said, she'd really like to see the mileage doubled, I said, well, I had $6 in my mind. So she and I are not far off. And then when you just mentioned the $45, we're not far off again. My fixed cost was at $40,000. And, that's after that's not just looking and saying, well, I'm just gonna take a medium. That's not what I did. That's after I,
Looking at our
wore out,
office.
one of these little, hey, give
We,
me,
we all have been.
these, give me calculators and,
And I don't
trying to
think,
come up with something that I felt like, I can go to the other 29,900 constituents in Grimes County and say, I feel very, very comfortable with what we did. I've done everything, from my heart for you, plus helping the fire departments, all the men and women that work in the fires, to control things. And, some of you weren't here when we went from the 16 to the 20,000, 16,667, and some of you weren't here when we even bumped it up to 16,667. And we were like, liabilities going up, we gotta help them. If it's just $1,000, we are making an asserted effort to try to get to $1,000.
The only thing, and I'm just interjecting this because, we haven't gotten a budget set. And we are going to be completing our budget within the next 2 weeks. When we double the amount of money that we have for fire protection, which basically 40 hours would double what we have, because we have 20,000. I'm not gonna say that we could give you 40. I'm gonna say when we get to do our figures and we get our numbers down, we can do the best we can. We can shoot for that much. But we can't stand here tonight and say, we all walk out and say, we're gonna do 40. All of this is trying to get a figure that the commissioners want us to consider and look at when we start putting the numbers in the budget. Because we haven't, like I say, we haven't completed the budget process at this time, and this gives us doubling, and that's gonna give us almost a $600,000 to $700,000 budget. Now, when we have a budget line that's costing us that much money, I think the commissioners are gonna try to come up with ESDs. They're gonna try to come up with formation of maybe another volunteer fire department. Because this money that is for the rural fire departments is not even what we have to give the city for their fire department. So when we increase that, again, we're getting close to $1 million for a line item. And this is when it becomes serious money. And this is when it's going to, the budget may not stand it. Because to have to say we have come up with $700,000 or $600,000 more, that's a lot of money to have to come up with 1 year. So for
Okay,
them
we
to,
keep talking about what we can't do. Let's talk about what we can do, Jeff.
well,
What
we don't
number-
know what we can do
Okay,
because we
what
haven't,
number are you proposing, or is the court proposing?
we can't propose. We cannot promise. We can come in with these numbers and we can try to make something work, but we cannot promise these numbers.
Okay, but what is the proposal from y'all? We've made a proposal. One of the things that we're looking at a 1 year or 2 year contract. One of the things that we'd like to do is get into a 2 year contract so we don't just turn around and come back here again in a few months, have to go through this whole thing again.
That makes it difficult for us because we don't know what our tax revenue is going to be next year. And if the tax assessor, the appraisal district comes back and says, this year we don't have as much product on inventory and our tax revenue is going to be down next year, you know, we have to, I think we can probably come up with some kind of a percentage to say fire department budgets are gonna be X number of percent of the budget. And then if it goes down, then obviously then we have to go from there. I think that would be a logical way to try to approach it rather than setting a fixed number. Once we get to this number, we can say that number is going to be 10%. Right now, you're looking at $1 million, if it even goes higher than that. You know, we're probably looking at 8-9% of the county's total budget for fire departments. And I'm not exactly sure how that ranks with other counties around us, but if you come up with that kind of a number and you say, okay, that percentage is based on the revenue of our tax money that we get to come in, and if rather than locking it in, we can say, and we'll probably have to, again, we had this discussion in a meeting the other day with our county attorney about having multiple year contracts that can be renewed if it's agreed upon by both parties. Would that still be workable in this situation?
I suspect that it's possible, but if you're dealing with the budget, I think you point out the issue, and that is the budget is going to change, or the amount of funds that are available is going to change. And you're not talking about anything different than you require departments in the county. Come every year and tell us what you need, and we'll decide whether or not we can fund what you're requesting for your office. So I understand the desire, but I would have a concern that you wouldn't know what revenue is going to be that far out. I think you could probably orchestrate it, but I have a concern.
And I'd like to clarify just for everybody, just so we all understand what we're doing, is that we as a group have been meeting now since probably July on putting together the county's entire budget, all the different departments that are within the county. And then we don't know exactly what that budget's going to be until the tax appraisal district comes to us and says, here's what we anticipate our tax collections to be for the following year. And we have to take that number and break it down by department and say, okay, if we get a little bit of a tax increase, then we have this department that needs this, and this department that needs this, and this department. And then we have to make all those numbers fit. So hopefully what we can come to tonight is that we can get a number that we can go to say, okay, when we get to that point where we have to finalize this budget, and we have that final meeting, we can say, okay, we can increase the fire department by this much. We may not be able to do this much, or if we can do road and bridge, they're going to get this much. Or if we get in a situation like we're talking about, maybe in the coming years where maybe we don't have that revenue stream, then we've got to look at coming back to you and saying, okay, we can't do that much this year because we don't have that much money in the budget for the fire department. So I'm just trying to kind of lay it out for everybody so you know what we're up against is that we have to try to take the numbers that when you come home and the head of the household says, okay, here's $100 for groceries, and they look and say, well, we need $140 for groceries. Well, that's all I've got. That's all the revenue that we have. The county does. We just can't print money. We don't have it. So we have to operate with what our tax revenues, with what all of you, they're taxpayers. When you pay your taxes and we get our tax money in, that's what we have to base this off of. So hopefully we can come up with some, and I think that we've got a good number, probably a close number. And again, once we sit down and the auditor's office comes back and says, okay, based on, and I guess how would you do that, Jesse? Would you take an average of the last 3 years or 5 years of runs, because obviously 2011, everybody's runs were way up, or do we go out the high and the low and say we're going to take the last 3 years, the last 5 years average, and throw out the high and the low, and then take those numbers, and then we're gonna have to base our projections off of that. And then we have to look at it and say, okay, either we've got that tax money that we can turn around and put back into the departments, or we don't have it. We've got to figure out then if 680 is a number that we can, as a base number that we can start with. Can we do that, or can't we do that? In the same way with the run costs, and I'm thinking, kind of along with Commissioner Pinckey, what I had down here was somewhere around between $38,000 and $40,000. And that's again, that's doubling. Now, when we get to that number, and Jesse looks at us and goes, you guys spent all the county's money on the fire departments, now we don't have anything for road and bridge. We don't have anything for health services for the sheriff's department and all those other people. Then we have to go back and say, okay, well, let's take a little bit from here and take a little bit from here and add to this or whatever. So it's going to be a lengthy process between now and then, but hopefully we can come up with that. And I don't, again, I'm not trying to shoot down your $40, but I mean, I'm saying, and really are boosting it up, I guess, from $20 to 38 or 40, whatever. But
You said 1,000, but what you saying?
I'm sorry.
I thought that's what you said, that you said 38,000.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean $38. I'm sorry. Yeah, $38. Yeah.
I wanna be, I don't wanna assume anything, so let's
Commissioners, are y'all, okay, just on the negotiation part, are we talking about trying to negotiate with 680, just on the table right now, just discussion, okay? It's 680 a mile, possible $40 an hourly rate, and possibly 40,000 for a fixed cost for the year. That's the numbers that are on the table right now. for
That's what's on the table,
to
and as I
discuss.
caution you, since everything is doubled, and that doubles our line item, I don't know if it's gonna happen. I don't know that it's real.
That's a 100% increase in everything across the board. There's not a department in this county that's anywhere close to that.
And that's what, I mean, we've got.
That's a lot. You know, 100% increase, to me, that's a lot of money, folks.
Traditionally, we've been looking at, I know what Commissioner Pinckey was referring to, but going from 16 to 20, you're looking at a 20 to 25% increase.
That went up 3% last year,
Right,
didn't it?
yes.
3%?
And now we're looking at 100% increase. So
It wouldn't have been 100 if it would have been increased over the past 5 years. I mean, I know you can't change what you've changed already, but, we haven't had an increase, except for the fixed rate, and so, the 100%, yeah, it sounds high, but if it had been done over the last 5 years, it wouldn't be 100% today.
Well, even take Richards, for instance, I'm just going through a bit. They've got a total of $34,000. Well, 40 is a whole lot more than 34. Now, the others, I'm sure, let me find, there are more. I'm gonna say that for what was turned in to operate for a year,
Where are you
was
getting the
basically,
$34,000, Judge? We're trying to follow along.
I got these,
Operating costs.
the budget request.
Oh, you're talking about the budget.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And on the budget request, here we've got Anderson, $31,900. Well, see, when I read these, I was thinking, we're 20 now, maybe we could go up to 30. Because 30 is basically going, I mean, it's pretty middle of the road as far as what this takes them to operate on 1 year.
And I
Well,
think
okay, but that's not taking into all of the operating costs. That's just fixed operating. That's what we know daily, what the department's gonna
Well, not
expend.
daily.
Well, annually, what the department
Annually.
is gonna spend. It doesn't take into account the other maintenance and stuff that we have to do on equipment, the
Well,
testing
I
we
know,
have
but
to
you
do on
have to
equipment.
understand, y'all are having fundraisers. Y'all are doing other things. And this is where if we have to cover all costs, I'm telling you again.
Nobody's
if we-
asked for all the costs to be covered, Judge. Even at $40,000, we're not getting all of the costs covered.
How many of you,
She's
how many of
looking
you
at-
expect the price of diesel to go down in the next year?
I'm not
How
talking
many of you
diesel.
expect anything
I'm
to
not
go down
talking
on this?
diesel at all.
She's just
I
talking about
understand
operating
diesel.
costs.
I'm talking on the fixed rate.
Fixed being to cover the operating cost of the
I'm
department.
talking
That's what
on
she's
the
talking
fixed
about.
rate. I'm not talking diesel.
Forget fuel,
I'm not
forget
talking
gas.
hourly. I'm not talking anything but fixed rate. Because fixed rate is what is doubling from, has been talked about 20 to 40,000. That's a tremendous amount of strain on our budget. So I don't want you to walk away and realistically think that we're going to be able to, no holds barred, work that into our budget. That's a tremendous strain. So when I was looking at these, and I saw the fixed operating cost for annual payment, 31,900, I thought, well, if we compromised, if we pushed it up to 30,000, that would be something we could start talking about. But doubling it, to me, is a little high.
And I think it has to be based on by department. Obviously, some departments are much larger than others. And I don't know if the fixed rate straight across the board, if that's fair to the larger departments. And if the smaller departments really, can justify that. But I know that what we did with the road and bridge and the sheriff's department, that we looked at a fuel increase of about 30%. $3 a gallon, that's 90 cents. So, and again, we don't set the price of diesel. We don't have any control over that. But what we're saying now is that we're giving the other departments a 30%. The other departments that are county-owned departments, these are supplements we're supposed to be doing. We're giving our own departments 30%. We're allowing for a 30% increase in fuel. And yet, we're talking about a 100% increase in fuel for these departments.
Yeah, but what is their rate? What are they getting now?
What I'm saying is, when we look at their line item for fuel,
I understand that.
we take that and we say, okay, based on, and we actually have numbers of what that department, I'm not gonna pick on Mr. Cochran, the road and bridge engineer, but we look at what road and bridge spent last year and this year on fuel, and then we projecting, and nobody knows, we're just grabbing at straws and saying, okay, what if it goes up 30%? If it goes up $1 a gallon? And then we have to try to factor that into what they use. But here we're looking at, and I know that a lot of the departments buy at the pump where we have a contract for fuel, and so hopefully we're trying to keep the price down on fuel, but that may not be the situation there. You may have to pay a little bit more at the pump. But, and I'm not suggesting a 30% increase. I'm saying that that's what we've done with the other departments in the county.
I know, but you gotta be a benchmark there somewhere. If they're already, let's say on an average of, $4.50 a gallon, or, whatever it is, and we're at $3.47.
All we do is we take whatever those fuel bills, that when the treasurer gets the fuel bills for that year, she breaks it out and says, this is what road and bridge they spent, and I'm just gonna throw a number out there. They spent $100,000 on fuel last year. And we say, okay, well, we don't have enough funds, we don't have enough tax money to make this budget come out, so we may have to go back to 25 or 28% on each one of these departments to take it out of fuel or whatever. And I think what the judge is trying to say is that the number that we come up with tonight is a starting baseline for us, and then we may have to adjust up or down from there to see how we can fit all this in.
Well, let me ask you this, you said you cut back on taking 30% to 28%, so are you cutting the budget, or are you cutting out the work? Are you just not using that vehicle, not purchasing the fuel?
That's all we have to do, is we have to go to that department head and say, this is what your fuel budget's gonna be for the year, and it's that department head's job to manage that fuel and try to stay within his budget.
Right. So you say we're not working today because we're gonna overrun our fuel expenses?
We have been very close to being faced with that, and a lot of counties and a lot of cities have been faced with that when they say, hey, we just don't have the tax revenue. If we don't have the money, we can't promise it to a department if we don't have the tax revenue.
If you're going from 340 a mile to 680, just if, you're doubling that, your fuel's gonna be okay for you guys.
I
Now,
was using his example.
I understand you were using that, but I'm still looking at, you can look at this. If you're getting 100% increase in something, if that was the case, and you're getting 100% increase in something, somebody out there should be smiling somewhere. I'll just, if we're even considering that, I'm just talking about on this one thing, it's gotta be a whole lot better than the 340 you've been getting. I mean, the fact that the court would consider that, I'm a little bit I'm for you guys, but I'm a little bit surprised at that price. I mean, I didn't expect anybody to come up with that high price.
And
Or the
nobody's
others.
rejected that number.
Yeah.
We can take off this weekend and let it burn till Monday, you know.
Well, of
save
course,
some
you can't do
gas.
that. If you were gonna do that, you wouldn't be here.
Yeah, and you have that choice to answer the call or not go out. If you don't wanna go out as volunteers, and you get a call and you say, well, I'm right in the middle of summer, I'm not gonna go tonight. That's your choice.
Ask anybody in this room that's ever done that.
it
But I'm saying, we don't expect that, but to say
You
we're
have
gonna,
to
you're gonna let
do
it
that,
burn, I mean, that's,
So you also gotta look at the cost. We may travel 1 mile from the fire station, but be there for 8 hours.
correct.
So we're only gonna get a mile there and a mile back, which is $6.80 for fuel costs. But our trucks are running for 8 hours.
And I was trying to calculate that by the number of
Then
fire
again, we
runs
might go
divided by
10
hours,
miles,
how
be
many
there
hours
5
you
minutes,
spend
go
out
back.
there.
It's gotta average out there some, but it.
Never
it-
averages out.
Well, but if you're doubling whatever it is you were getting, if you're possibly doubling that, it's got to be beneficial to you. It's got to help you offset your costs there some. It has to.
Looking
It
at
possibly
this,
not be a negative.
one of the things that was looked at when we were putting some of these numbers together was the census numbers for the county, the number of households, number of people in this county. From 2000 to 2010, the population of this county increased 100%, just over 100%, it doubled. And we're in the same growth pattern right now. You can drive down any of the major roads in the county and see we've got subdivisions going in, we've got things going in. Some of the departments are making an effort to talk to subdivision developers and say, look, you know, you're building this in our area, our business that is moving in, help us out. And there's not a whole lot of help coming. We're not saying that the numbers we presented are firm. The 680, maybe we can work with that. I'm not saying no, nobody's saying no to that. I think where we got hung up at is at our flat annual fixed rate cost. I think we're kind of close on the hourly rate. I heard $38 and I heard 40. I think we're close there.
And I'd like to say on that note, Chief Sharon, you said 100%. I mean, we've had 5 years, what you were saying, and then but you gotta keep in mind, you can't go from this to just that. I mean, why not compromise? Let's
Oh, I understand.
work to meet somewhere in the middle. We can't just go from 5% to 100%.
Right, what I'm saying is that, you know, 100% sounds like a big number, and it is, okay? But it wouldn't be a big number if it was an increase through the last 5 or 10 years, whatever it was, and we haven't had that increase.
Well, we
Yeah, that's
haven't
what I'm
had it, we just haven't had it a large one. 'cause
We only
last year-
had a 20, up to 20,000 from 16, but we haven't had a fuel cost or an hourly rate for the equipment in years.
So we're
So
trying to
that's
get
what we're
there.
talking about, is the numbers
One of the
high,
other points
yes.
that I'd like to bring up is that we do have, like Iola has their ESD set up. And I know there's been some discussion about the funds that they get from their ESD. We have a lot of the other departments that don't have that don't have an ESD. And I know from talking with Chief Sharon and some of the other ones, and I think that if you put it to a vote, or let me ask you, what do you think if each department went out there and put it to a vote of the people in your area of responsibility, do you think an ESD would pass?
No.
Nobody wants
It-
new taxes, obvious.
It would not pass, and those fire trucks better not leave that area. If that other fire department needed help, they come. The people that pay for that fire truck expect that fire truck to stay in that fire.
So you're saying the voters would not pass an ESD?
No.
Well, then how can you expect us to take the taxpayers' money that said they don't want an ESD, they don't want another tax, and we take their money and give it to you because the voters are saying, we don't want another tax, we don't want to do that. So it's hard for us to justify to sit here and say, okay, we can give you a 100% increase with the taxpayers' money, when everybody has said that if the people had a choice, they would vote against that.
They don't wanna be forced to pay taxes.
That's right.
They
I mean,
want,
I'm
they want,
just
they
thinking
want
logically that
they
if
want
people,
911
if we put it
services,
to a
but
vote
they
of the
won't pay
people we're talking about 4 people here, they're gonna have to vote on this. If it's a tie, then the judge is gonna break it, but if we put it to a vote of all the citizens in the county and said, would you be willing to increase your taxes by X number of dollars to be able to fund these fire departments to a 100% increase? And I'm not saying that's where we're going, to a 50% increase. I'm saying that it probably would be a tough battle to get that to pass. So we're in the same boat when we leave this room and the people, our constituents say, how in the world could you spend that much money with the fire departments? You know, you're wasting our tax dollars, or you're not prorating it outright. So that's the battle that we're fighting.
Well, that's what they say up front, but then when we're cutting their kid out of a car out on the highway, and something breaks down, the first thing we hear is, why didn't you have the right equipment? Or why did you have to call
We went
somebody
through
else?
this, with you one
Somebody
time
else.
before, and the Houston firefighters that lost their lives had the right equipment, and they lost their lives. We can't protect everybody out there all the time. Y'all can't do it and we can't do it, and all the money in the world isn't gonna do it. You know it and I know it. And that's
I
a bad
understand.
example, Chris, and you've used it a number of times.
Let's don't begin to argue because that's not productive. Our main concern is we do have the health and safety of the people of Roberts County.
And I'm not saying that you don't. What I'm saying is that whether you hear it about taxes or whether we hear it about providing services, there's that people
But
get upset
Commissioner-
about lack of service or they don't think they're getting the
Commissioner
services.
Creeper has made a point, a very valid point. It's taxpayer money, and we have to know this taxpayer money has to go and cover all of our departments. If there is so much need, and they're not willing to do an ESD, what does that tell the commissioners?
But how many other departments in the county have gotten increases over the last 4 to 5 years and we haven't?
Well, there's a lot of difference into being able to maintain a road, road and bridge. They have to be able to be passable or the fire truck can't go down them anyway.
But
On that note,
and these
On that note, the road and bridge department does have an advantage over all the fire departments. We're supposed to have our trucks serviced and maintained by a certified, licensed mechanic for emergency apparatus, which gets expensive for $42 quart oil change.
But we're not saying it's not expensive, we're saying that every time I go to a meeting of judges, I talk to them about fire protection. Because it weighs heavy on my mind that we have to have so little to go around. And every one of them said they've gone to either a countywide or a district-wide ESD. Because that is money that you can depend on. It's paid every tax season, and it is paid on a certain, however many cents it is. It is a guaranteed income. They supplement their fire departments. And that's how they operate, and that's how they make it work. Anybody that goes to Montgomery and goes to the fire station, they should go to the job. They have an ESD. ESDs are gonna be a wave of the future. And to me, if we recognize it as a wave of the future, we need to start getting on track as to how we're gonna fund the continued expenses. Because you brought up, well, we're gonna have to have it manned at some time. We can't pay to man a fire station unless we would farm our own fire station. I'm not trying to do that.
You don't have the
I'm
money to
trying
do
to
that.
say, we don't have the money, but where's the tax, that's what I mean. So the conversations get so complicated when we try to solve all the problems at one time. So what I would like to do is try to get this problem tonight taken care of and have a consensus. We'll try to do what we can at these rates because the budget process has to be completed.
You know, they'd probably go for an ESD if you could guarantee them that you'd lower the taxes in some other areas, so they wouldn't have to be, you know, just inundated with taxes.
Well, there are no guarantees.
But then we wouldn't have the revenue to do the things. And again, the sheriff's department, the road and the bridge, I guess by local government code or statute or whatever, the county has the authority to put those things together. I'm just guessing that every one of these volunteer fire departments were put together by people just like all of you are, that were concerned about the health and safety of the people in their community, and they got together and said, let's put us a fire department together. Let's get training, let's all get into this, and let's do this. And so you do that as a community effort. The people in the community get together. And that's why through your annual fundraisers and the different things that you do, that people volunteer and they donate to the fire departments. These are not something that the county, we didn't go out and ask people to start their fire departments. They come to us and say, would you be willing to accept us as a volunteer fire department if they're a member of the association or whatever. So what we do here is we try to take a look at that and say, okay, what can we do to supplement the fire departments? Where can we go with that? What can we do? And obviously when you say, well, if you created an ESD, but you'd have to lower the property taxes here, well, then we don't have the funds, you know, and so it's still going to you and it's not going to the other departments that we are responsible for.
Creating an ESD and having your fundraiser is almost a conflict, because as Mr. Green has pointed out to us in some of our own meetings, if you have an ESD and you force this tax upon people, people that donate, such as himself, are less likely to do so. They actually don't want to donate because you force the tax upon them. And that's...
Yeah, I'm from the old school anyway. I'm not voting for a tax increase from me or you.
And several of the people that I'm talking, we don't, this isn't an ESD.
Right.
In an ESD.
Well, we're getting off focus
I guess
because,
how we got to this, I'm sorry, Judge, to cut you off, but my question is we have one fire department that has an ESD, that has tax revenue coming in. Is it fair for us to budget the same
That's
amount
not
for that?
guaranteed though.
That's
not
You
guaranteed.
can vote on what this has.
We're not guaranteed that money.
Okay.
Can I make a comment? We're talking about ESD, okay? ESD is not gonna happen today. It's not gonna happen on this year's budget. So
guess that's
can we
what I'm
get
saying.
back to what the issue is at hand? ESD, I know a lot of people's talking about it, but get back to what we're here for the budget for the upcoming year.
And that was part of my discussion is that because some departments have other sources of revenue and some don't. Some of these people are making 6,000, they're making 580 hours of runs in a year. Some are making 40 hours of runs a year. So how do we justify saying, okay, we're gonna give this department $30,000 and we're gonna give the one that's making 580 hours, we're gonna give them $30,000. And the ones that have an extra source of income and that revenue stream, should we give them the same thing that the ones that don't have that? So I think we're getting close to the point that we can say we're getting close on the fuel and on the hourly rate, but is it fair for every department to get the same? I'm asking y'all, do y'all think it's fair for every department to get the same flat fee?
Yes.
You do? I mean, I'm asking you, I'm not.
Yes.
The fire departments that run 500 calls versus us little guys in Shiro who only run 40 calls or however in a 2-month period, they're gonna get that extra money because they're running double what we run, they're running triple what we run. We don't have any other sources of income other than the firefighters. Every time we go out and we have a fundraiser, we're the ones who pay for the fundraiser.
I understand.
We don't get community, we don't have a community that's big enough to help us, and they don't help us. So the firefighters are the ones who are donating to, we're buying all the issues. Now we get a commissioner now and again who will come in and help us out a little bit with our fundraisers, but we can't count on our community for our fundraisers. The firefighters you see right here are the ones who are paying for those fundraisers out of our own pockets.
I'd like to, maybe go over to fixed costs.
Yeah.
And, if we go, say, $30 an hour instead of the 20.
Okay, are you talking about hourly, or you talking about?
The hourly
Lost-
fixed.
Lost
30,000.
I'm talking,
I thought we were at 38, 40 a minute
That's
ago.
hourly.
She said fixed costs, 30,000 rather than the 20.
So you're talking about fixed costs?
Fixed, okay, well, we're at 20 today. You're talking about looking at what now? I'm sorry.
30.
30 versus, we were talking earlier 40.
Because other than that, you're doing that doubling again.
I understand what you're saying. I was trying to figure out which one you were talking about.
Yeah, I was talking about The other one, we have them as fire runs, and then you have your fixed costs.
But from our standpoint, we're looking at eight fire departments. If we double what we did last year, that's gonna cost us $160,000.
Well, I didn't do.
I'm saying it, but looking at it from this standpoint, if we double the fixed cost at $160,000 and say, but we're gonna leave your fuel rate instead of $3.40 at $4 and your run cost, because we can control the fixed cost, we know what that part of our budget's gonna be, but we don't know what they're gonna turn in as far as the runs that they make. So, and I'm just putting that out there as a part of the equation, is that would we be better to double their fixed cost, but then maybe take back some on the hourly rate?
Because that's gonna help some of you guys that don't make as many calls, you're gonna have that $30,000 or
Right, because
$40,000.
you've got that 30 or 40,000, whatever you're talking about here, as a fix. And you look, a lot of the majority of the operating costs are between 30, 35, 38,000 in the neighborhood versus some that are, a lot more than that.
It's just easier for everybody if we have a number that's a hard number that we can deal with versus something that we have to anticipate what's gonna happen and take an average. So I'm just throwing that out. When you say go back to the original, I'm saying they need a fuel increase.
We're not walking backwards. We're going
I think
forward.
what Mr. Krieger's saying is, let's go ahead and look at 40,000 for the annual stipend. Let's look at somewhere in the neighborhood 35 for the hourly.
Well, and
Is that what you're saying, or
what I was
maybe a
gonna do
little?
is once we get it, we just gotta get all this together. But once we get to that point, if we say, okay, if we increase road and bridge, and if we increase the sheriff's department and these others, if we gave them a 30% increase on fuel, let us look at what would happen if we gave you double that number. Now we know that that's gonna cost us $160,000 more out of our budget this year. And if we look at, then we can break it down by percentages and say, okay, if we can increase their fuel by 30%, and if we can increase their hour by 50% or something like that, then we have a number that we can work with, and then they know that when they make that run, what they're gonna get back for it. And we know, we have a number that we can go to the taxpayers with and say, we feel like that at least we've got a number we can operate with.
That's gotta help some of you guys to keep from digging in your own pockets,
But
if
the
they don't
thing-
have the community support.
Now, are we including Navasota in or not?
That's also
No,
question.
that was.
Because you said 8
It's
times.
7.
Yeah.
Seven.
Yeah, I'm talking about the rule
Okay.
fire departments.
This is the problem, because when we add Navasota in and we get the increases, I caution you, anytime we're almost at $1 million for a department,
They're $1 million for
It's
8
not-
departments.
it's not going to be likely that we're going to be able to sustain that. We can put it in, but $1 million is a lot of money. So we can go and take these numbers, but know that if the budget does not accommodate these numbers, they will not be able to be realistically put in. Because when you talk this amount on top of what we have to negotiate with Navasota, you're getting, because this doubles our amount, and it would be close to $700,000. And so when you get to $700,000, and we haven't even put Navasota in there, you're getting close to $850,000, which is as much.
When you come up with $1 million figure, so we're trying to.
Yeah, that's what we're trying
When
to
we get all of the run costs with all these increases doubled, when we get the fixed rate doubled, all of our budget for fire protection will be doubled. We have, what is the,
We have 370,000.
see, 370 doubled. You're over $800,000.
740.
And then you do the Navasota in there, we're up to almost $1 million, and I'm telling you right now, our budget cannot handle that. I can tell you right
That's
now.
about 6% of our total budget for the county.
And we can't, we,
But right now, we're paying Navasota out of the total 370,000 that we have currently budgeted. So the way I looked at it was just taking, I took a 30% increase. I didn't break it down. I just took a total 30% increase. And then I subtracted out what anticipated for the city and still came up with, where we can make it. in what I feel in the budget, because it's $111,000 increase over the 7. And on average, without breaking it down to fixed and run cost, it's $51,142 per department for those 7 departments. And I could go in and break it down, you know, by a mileage reimbursement and
The mileage reimbursement's not gonna work for some of these folks because they don't put enough miles, they don't make enough calls. But if we could do something with the flat rate, with the fixed cost, which is, what they're asking for is 60,000, if we could do something with that, and I'm not talking about 60,000. If we could do 30,000, that gives departments that don't have a lot of money, $10,000 more to pay for whatever it is they need to pay for it. And then work on this other stuff on maybe a more realistic
and
figure.
they will know that on October 1st of 2013, that they can say, you know, submit their letter, I'm ready for, you know, we're ready for our check, and then they'll know that they already have $30,000 in their bank account.
So we're down to 30,000.
No, I'm just using, no.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we change, then we'll know a little bit more about where this budget's going, to get y'all's feedback on the Navasota budget. I know their budget's not set, and I know that y'all received that information, that they don't have a set budget at this time. It hadn't been approved. September, I think, is when they approved their budget.
I would like to see us consider that separate, Judge, just because
That's
the rule.
Yeah,
That's a totally different
It's under the
situation.
agreement, but it's still under fire protection. When we increase this, you have to figure that in.
I understand.
And it's all fire protection line
Work with the
items.
number that they already submitted to.
Are you talking about? I'm sorry.
I mean, when we're sitting over here, we're looking at what they submitted, so just, you know, 'cause that's what they submitted.
I think we need to kind of push forward on these other 2 items here.
But-
I think, I'm gonna go back to the $30,000 fixed cost, it's a 50%
Working
increase.
with the rules.
And then you get more mileage than what you've been getting, more on your mileage, whether it's $1, $2 a mile more on that, you can end up with a whole lot more money than you did last year. And that being said, I know what your theory is on, we haven't done anything in 5 or 10 years. I had nothing to do with that, neither did you, Dan. But the fact is, there's only so much money to do this with, and we have to be somewhat realistic. And that 100% increase over the board, or 300%, 200%, that's not in the budget. That's not gonna work.
You have a 5-year history in the fire department.
Yes, sir.
Does anybody have a 5-year history on tax revenue? As far as what was spent on fire protection in fire departments, have you ever overrun that budget? Or have you ever given money back to surplus?
It just depends, you know, you're averaging in the fires. That's where, you know, if we have to average those in, we went over. And so, that's why, it's not realistic to average it when you take that we had 2 major fires, and there's no way to average it.
Well, you said throughout your worst and your best years, where are we sitting as far as tax revenue as opposed to our expenditures? Have we ever had an overrun or a surplus that got put back into the general fund?
I couldn't answer that, the auditor would have to answer that.
How about your 7
Okay.
months, I can't tell you.
When we get your run costs,
There we go.
okay, and we pay that, if there's money left over in that line item at the end of the year because y'all didn't have as many runs as we budgeted for, because we have to pull a number out of the sky, basically, to guess how many runs you're gonna have and how many miles you're gonna have. So yes, there has been money put back into the general fund out of a line item, but then there's also been times where we've had to do budget amendments to put money into that line item because we've gone over. So there's play, give and play in both ways, okay? It's and every department within the county doesn't always use all their line item. So that money goes back into the general fund if they don't use it. So, you know, you can't you can't look at that and say, well, you know, if there's money left over in that line item, you should divide it up amongst the fire departments. No, we don't do that with our own departments. It goes back into the general fund, which helps build the reserves so that we have money if disaster comes, or we have money for capital projects. And that's just the way the local government code is set up.
Y'all been working with your pencils over there, commissioners. Let's see what y'all have. Let's try to come to a
My
consensus.
smartphone's not that smart. I didn't come up with a whole lot.
Basically, I think what you've said, and I think.
Whoa, wait a minute.
Commissioner.
Let me let them talk, okay? Because we don't want to put words out there that they may have to come back and counteract.
Well,
Let's let them
this
talk.
is numbers that he put
I
out.
know, but let him go from his figures and present the numbers that he's been working on to y'all.
I would like to see us at least try to, and again, if we take into consideration the last 2 years, I think last year we gave them a $4,000 increase. So we're talking about a $10,000 increase in fixed costs this year. That's $14,000 that we've raised that up. I mean, I think that's a pretty healthy increase. I personally would like to see if we could do more than 30,000 a year, but when you look at it over a 2-year average, and I was trying to figure that out, a percentage increase over the last 2 years, that's, you know, that's a pretty good increase. Now, again, if $30,000 is a base number that we have to start with, and our goal would be 40,000 when we get down to finalizing this, if we could work inside that range somewhere and say, okay, we want to at least do this, but if we can do more, we can do more. I personally would like to see us do more with fixed cost, just because it helps them budget when they know when they need certain things. They know they've got that money there. Their run costs are based on production, on what they do, and when they go out. So, and again, we can take a percentage of the fuel that they're spending now and a percentage of the hourly rate and try to come up with that and work that more into the budget. We've got a hard number that we know if we do 30,000, you know, or 40,000 for each department or whatever, then we know what we're talking about there. And then see what we have left and say, okay, now if we need to increase this 30, 40, 50%, whatever, then we take those two items. And that may not be somebody.
What is the suggested fuel and run? I know you, to double it, you suggested 100%, you don't want it. The 50%? I'm just trying to put some numbers in here so when we get to.
Again, those two numbers, they're Jesse, do you have what our total run costs were for last year?
210,000 more.
No, that was what was budgeted.
Total run cost was $118,788.26.
How much?
$118,788.26.
That's for run, and combined it's 252.
Now, and fuel, run and fuel, you have
Run
together.
and fixed costs. Rent, the fuel is in part of the run.
I'm talking about.
$250,000 last year. $250,000 basically.
Last year, our total budget
Total.
was $252,768.26. And this year, we budgeted, or that was our expenses. We did budget $343,980 last year. And we increased this year up to $370,000 total. And that's broken down, 20,000 per all 8 fire departments, not just the 7, and 210,000 for all of the run costs for all 8 departments, because we didn't have the interlocal agreement with the Navasota Fire Department. So, if we look at raising the fixed cost to $30,000 a year, that's $210,000 just for the 7 fire departments. Okay, then if we increase the run cost, and I have no objection to, you know, trying to do that, because I agree, we need to do that. The fuel cost is horrible. But the thing is, we have to look at the overall, how much we increase your budget overall. Right now, if you just look at, say, an $18 million budget. Right now, 2% of that budget is, a little over 2% rather, of that budget is for fire protection.
And what we're projecting is if we did what we originally said, we're looking at more like a 6% of the total county's budget going to volunteer fire departments.
It's a 300%.
Yeah.
Small price of
It is a small price to pay, but you've got to realize that's a big chunk that the county has not experienced before.
But you, based on your first numbers, you break down your budget, we came in half of what you budgeted for.